What if something as simple as masturbation could be silently affecting your mental health in ways you've never imagined? It's an act many people turn to for relief, whether it's for stress, anxiety, or even just a moment of escape. But what if that relief comes at a hidden cost? Is it possible that the very act meant to calm your mind could in reality be setting you up for a deeper emotional struggle? You see, for many, masturbation is something that happens behind closed doors, something that's kept private and rarely talked about in relation to mental health. But what if I told you that the connection between masturbation and depression is something far more common and potentially damaging than anyone dares to discuss? Most of us have heard of the temporary high you feel after sexual release, but what happens when that high fades away? And why is it that sometimes instead of feeling better, we end up feeling worse, more isolated, and even more emotionally drained than before? It's a cycle that's difficult to talk about and harder to break. But in this video, we're about to dig into something that's rarely discussed. Stay tuned, because the emotional trap no one talks about might just be something you've experienced yourself, and understanding it might just change the way you think about both masturbation and mental health. Masturbation has long been used as a quick fix for a number of emotional struggles. Whether it's stress, loneliness, or even the weight of a bad day, many people turn to it as a form of temporary relief. The immediate gratification it provides is undeniable. It offers a quick release, a momentary escape from the pressures of daily life. But here's the catch. The relief it provides is, well, just that, temporary. And while that might seem like a harmless thing at first, the truth is that over time it can develop into something much more damaging. Let's pause for a moment and think about what happens when you masturbate. The momentary rush of pleasure floods the brain with chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. It's the same feel-good chemicals released when we experience anything that brings us joy or satisfaction. These chemicals act like a temporary band-aid, masking deeper emotions. And while the immediate relief feels good, it doesn't last. What follows is what some would describe as an emotional dip, often a sense of guilt, emptiness, or a crash. You might even feel worse than before. But why does this happen? The reason is simple, and it's one of the most significant traps people fall into. Masturbation can't solve emotional problems. It's not designed to. It's a form of escape that gives you the illusion of relief. But it never addresses the root cause of your emotional struggles. So instead of genuinely healing from stress, anxiety, or loneliness, you find yourself caught in a loop. You use masturbation to cope with your emotions, feel better for a short while, and then, once the chemicals wear off, you're left with the same unresolved feelings. You try to fix them with the same solution, hoping for a different result. But it's always the same. A temporary high, followed by an emotional low. Think about it. You're looking for a quick fix, a way to escape the overwhelming feelings that are tugging at you. But that quick fix doesn't fix anything. It just masks the problem. And here's the kicker. Over time, the brain begins to associate masturbation with temporary emotional relief. So the more you turn to it as a way to cope, the more your brain starts to rely on it. It's a cycle of avoidance, not resolution. The problem is, this cycle can extend beyond just a feeling of guilt or emptiness after masturbation. As time goes on, these emotional dips can grow deeper, making it harder to break free from the pattern. Instead of addressing the anxiety, sadness, or frustration you're feeling, you're simply ignoring it, hoping that the next release will be the one to bring you the emotional peace you're seeking. The emotional trap here is that the cycle starts to feel necessary. It feels like a lifeline even though it's a drowning one. Many people think of masturbation as harmless, as something they can engage in without much consequence. And in moderation, it might not be a problem. But when it becomes the go-to response to deeper emotional struggles, it can have serious consequences on mental health. Instead of finding healthier ways to process emotions, like talking to someone, exercising, or pursuing a hobby, you start turning to masturbation as your default coping mechanism. This cycle becomes so ingrained in your routine that it becomes difficult to imagine how to break free from it. Another issue that often arises is the emotional baggage attached to masturbation itself. People dealing with depression or anxiety often experience a deeper sense of shame or guilt after masturbating, particularly if they feel that their emotional state hasn't truly improved. This is when the trap becomes even more insidious. You try to numb out your feelings, but then instead of feeling relief, you're left with even more negative emotions. Guilt for not feeling better, frustration for still being stuck, and sadness for feeling like you're not making any progress. These feelings compound the ones that initially drove you to masturbate in the first place. Instead of breaking the cycle, you end up reinforcing it. Now let's take a moment to understand why this emotional roller coaster becomes so hard to break free from. The cycle itself creates a feedback loop in your brain. Every time you masturbate, you're giving yourself that initial high, followed by a crash. Your brain remembers this sequence. It learns that the short-term escape works, even if it doesn't resolve anything. The problem, however, is that over time, your brain starts to rely on that escape. It becomes the quickest way to avoid your emotional pain, even if it only lasts for a brief moment. And because the brain loves efficiency, it will continue to rely on the behavior that provides the fastest reward. This is what makes it so difficult to break free from the cycle. Masturbation becomes a coping mechanism, but one that leads to further emotional instability rather than providing the release or relief you were hoping for. Your body and mind crave that instant gratification, but deep down you know it's not really solving your problems. It's a temporary escape from a much deeper emotional landscape that needs addressing. Over time, these emotional crashes after masturbation can lead to a pattern of emotional instability. The guilt, loneliness, and confusion start to take root, leaving you with a heightened sense of frustration and helplessness. And as you continue down this path, it becomes harder and harder to see a way out of the cycle. It feels like the only escape is the same one that keeps trapping you. Masturbation. This is why the emotional trap is so dangerous. It's not just the act itself, but the way it gets embedded in your emotional coping mechanism. So what can you do about it? First, it's important to acknowledge that this cycle exists. Simply recognizing that masturbation might be serving as a temporary emotional crutch is the first step in breaking the loop. The next step is to start exploring healthier ways to deal with the emotions you're trying to avoid. This might mean confronting deeper emotional issues, seeking therapy, or building emotional resilience in a way that masturbation simply cannot provide. It's not easy, and it takes time. But once you understand that masturbation, in this context, is just a temporary distraction rather than a long-term solution, you can begin to work on breaking the cycle. And once you do, you'll find that there are healthier, more fulfilling ways to cope with your emotions, ones that don't leave you feeling empty or guilty afterward. To truly understand why masturbation can become such an emotional trap, we need to look at what happens inside your brain. You see, the brain is wired to seek pleasure. It's constantly looking for ways to reinforce behaviors that make us feel good. And when we engage in activities like masturbation, it releases a flood of chemicals designed to make us feel great, if only for a moment. These chemicals, like dopamine and oxytocin, are often referred to as feel-good chemicals. They are what make you feel pleasure, satisfaction, and relaxation in the moment. Dopamine, in particular, is the brain's reward chemical. It's released when you experience something enjoyable, whether that's eating your favorite food, winning a game, or yes, engaging in sexual activity. The immediate release of dopamine gives you a sense of pleasure and satisfaction. But here's the problem. This flood of dopamine is temporary, and when it peaks, it crashes just as quickly. Your brain has been tricked into thinking that this surge of pleasure will solve your emotional issues, but instead of healing or processing those emotions, you're left with a sense of emptiness. Now let's talk about oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is released during intimate moments, creating a sense of closeness and connection. In the context of masturbation, oxytocin can make you feel a temporary sense of relaxation and contentment. But just like dopamine, this feeling doesn't last. What you're left with is a craving for that same sensation. And so, your brain begins to associate masturbation with feeling good, which sets the stage for the cycle to begin. You do it again and again to recapture that high, even though you know deep down that the emotional relief is short-lived. When you repeatedly engage in the same behavior, like using masturbation as an emotional release, your brain becomes conditioned to this cycle. It starts expecting the quick fix every time you feel down, stressed, or anxious. This is where the real issue lies. The more you use masturbation to cope, the more ingrained it becomes as a solution to your problems. Over time, your brain becomes less capable of feeling genuine emotional fulfillment without it. It starts to rely on that dopamine and oxytocin rush for emotional stability, even though it's not providing the healing you need. But the science doesn't stop there. Here's where it gets even more complicated. As you continue to rely on this temporary fix, your brain's natural reward system starts to change. You become desensitized to the effects of dopamine and oxytocin. What once gave you an immediate feeling of pleasure no longer does. The high is shorter, and the crash is more intense. To chase that same pleasure, your brain requires more stimulation. And so what was once an occasional coping mechanism can turn into an automatic response, something you feel like you can't control. This desensitization means that over time, you might find yourself needing to engage in masturbation more frequently, just to feel that same rush. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more you engage in it, the more your brain becomes addicted to the chemical surge, and the harder it is to break free. Your brain is wired to seek that high, and when it doesn't get it, you feel worse. And because the emotional release doesn't last, you're left feeling like you need to go back for more. But there's another layer to this. Masturbation, while initially relieving stress, doesn't actually address the underlying causes of that stress. Instead of addressing the emotional or psychological issues you're facing, whether it's anxiety, loneliness, or depression, masturbation becomes a quick fix that only covers up the problem. The longer you rely on this behavior, the more you push the real issues further away. Your brain doesn't get the chance to process the feelings of sadness, frustration, or loneliness, because you're too busy chasing the next high. The result? A cycle of emotional avoidance and desensitization that only leaves you feeling more disconnected and, in the long run, more depressed. This emotional avoidance has serious consequences. Because your brain is conditioned to look for a quick, chemical-driven fix, it becomes harder to engage in activities that offer real emotional fulfillment. Things like spending time with loved ones, working on personal goals, or practicing self-care might seem less rewarding in comparison, because your brain is no longer used to processing pleasure in those contexts. What once might have felt fulfilling now feels dull. And because masturbation is now the go-to emotional escape, it becomes harder to find satisfaction in anything else. Over time, this emotional numbness can become a heavy weight, leading to feelings of isolation and depression. This brings us to a crucial point: the brain's neuroplasticity. This is the brain's ability to reorganize itself and form new neural connections. In theory, this means that your brain can change its behavior patterns, including the way it responds to emotional stress. However, to break the cycle of reliance on masturbation for emotional relief, you need to retrain your brain. This isn't something that can happen overnight. Just as your brain has learned to turn to masturbation for a quick fix, you can teach it new ways to handle emotional distress. But this process takes time, patience, and a commitment to healthier coping mechanisms. In essence, your brain is caught in a loop that is reinforced every time you use masturbation as an escape. The chemicals provide temporary relief, but the cycle of dopamine highs and crashes leaves you feeling emptier each time. The key to breaking this cycle lies in understanding the science behind it. Once you realize that your brain's reward system has become conditioned to expect that instant gratification, you can begin to rewire it by focusing on long-term emotional growth and healthier coping strategies. So what does this mean for you? Understanding the science behind why masturbation becomes emotionally addictive is the first step in breaking free from the cycle. By recognizing how your brain responds to these chemical surges, you can start to make better choices that lead to true emotional healing. The brain is capable of change, and with time, you can reprogram it to seek healthier ways of dealing with emotions that don't rely on a temporary high. It's not an easy journey, but it's possible to reclaim control of your emotional life and break the trap that masturbation can so easily become. When we're dealing with stress, anxiety, or even the weight of depression, it's natural to want to find something that offers relief. After all, we all want to feel better as quickly as possible. That's where masturbation can come in. For many, it seems like an easy, convenient way to escape the emotional weight of the moment, even if just for a short while. But here's the problem. While masturbation may provide temporary relief, it doesn't actually address the deeper emotional issues at play. The truth is, there's a massive difference between relief and true emotional healing. and understanding that difference is key to breaking free from this cycle. Let's break this down. Masturbation offers a quick escape from negative emotions. In the heat of the moment, when you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or just plain down, it can provide an immediate sense of pleasure, relaxation, and distraction. And for a while, that relief feels good. It feels like the tension melts away, and for a brief period the world becomes a little less heavy. But when the rush fades, so does the relief. What you're left with is often the same emotional baggage you were trying to escape in the first place, only now it may feel worse. You might even feel a sense of emptiness or guilt that makes your depression feel even more intense. So while masturbation can temporarily numb emotional pain, it doesn't heal it. This is where the key difference lies. True emotional healing requires facing the emotions you're trying to avoid, not numbing them. It requires addressing the underlying causes of your depression or anxiety, rather than relying on temporary distractions. When you use masturbation as a way to escape, you're essentially putting a band-aid over a much deeper wound. Sure, the pain might feel dulled in the moment, but the wound is still there, festering beneath the surface. And unless you acknowledge and address the root causes of your emotional distress, you'll find yourself returning to that same escape over and over again, without ever making any real progress. To understand this, we need to look at the difference between short-term relief and long-term emotional healing. Short-term relief is something that provides immediate gratification, like eating your favorite comfort food, binge-watching TV shows, or yes, masturbating. These things offer a temporary sense of pleasure, but they don't make a lasting change to your emotional well-being. They may help you feel better in the moment, but as soon as the relief fades, you're back to square one. And in some cases, these short-term fixes can even make things worse. They can reinforce the belief that you can't deal with your emotions without relying on them, creating a dangerous cycle. True emotional healing, on the other hand, is a process. It's not instantaneous. It requires confronting the emotions you've been trying to suppress and learning healthier ways to manage them. Healing doesn't come from avoiding your problems, it comes from facing them head-on and finding sustainable ways to cope. It's about developing emotional resilience, something that lasts, unlike the fleeting relief that masturbation provides. When you start addressing the root causes of your emotions rather than using short-term fixes to numb them, you create a foundation for real healing. This is when true emotional growth begins. This doesn't mean that masturbation in and of itself is inherently harmful. It becomes problematic when it's used as a way to avoid dealing with deeper emotional issues. When you rely on it to cope with your feelings of sadness, loneliness, or anxiety, it becomes a way to run away from those feelings, rather than face them. And over time, this avoidance leads to a lack of emotional progress. You might feel better temporarily, but you'll never really address the core of the issue. So how do we start shifting away from relying on masturbation as an emotional crutch? It starts with acknowledging that the quick relief it offers isn't enough. You need to dig deeper, understand what's really going on inside, and face those emotions head-on. You might need to seek professional help, such as therapy, to unpack the deeper issues that are driving your depression. You might need to learn new coping strategies, healthier ones that don't involve avoiding your emotions. This could include things like mindfulness, meditation, physical exercise, or developing deeper social connections. It's not an overnight process, but it's an essential part of breaking the cycle. As you start addressing the root causes of your depression or anxiety, you'll find that the need to turn to masturbation for relief begins to fade. You'll start to feel more in control of your emotions, rather than being at the mercy of quick temporary fixes. This is where true emotional resilience begins to take root. By working on long-term healing, you can break free from the cycle of relying on masturbation for relief and begin to heal in a more sustainable, lasting way. It's also important to recognize that the act of masturbating in itself doesn't need to be a source of guilt or shame. The problem arises when it's used as a crutch, as a way to avoid dealing with your emotions. The more you begin to recognize when you're using it for emotional avoidance, the more control you'll have over the cycle. The key is to break the pattern by learning how to deal with your emotions in a healthy way and finding strategies that truly help you heal, rather than just masking the problem. Masturbation can feel like a quick fix when you're struggling emotionally, but it doesn't provide lasting relief. The difference between short-term relief and true emotional healing is stark. One numbs the problem while the other addresses it. To break the cycle and heal from depression or anxiety, it's essential to face your emotions head-on and seek out long-term solutions. Only then can you create a healthier relationship with your emotions and find real healing that doesn't rely on temporary escapes. If you've ever used masturbation as a way to escape negative emotions, you might be familiar with a feeling that's often just as overwhelming as the emotions you're trying to avoid: guilt. It's an emotion that's deeply rooted in our perceptions of right and wrong, and when we engage in something that feels like a quick fix to emotional pain, the guilt that follows can amplify those very feelings we were trying to escape. And here's the kicker: the guilt is as disproportionate to the act itself, making everything feel worse than it really should. But why does this happen? Guilt can be a powerful emotion, and it often stems from a deeper sense of shame. For many people, masturbation is something that is not openly discussed or accepted in many circles. There's a stigma attached to it, whether because of cultural, religious, or personal beliefs, that makes it feel wrong, even when it's a completely natural human behavior. When you're dealing with emotional struggles like depression or anxiety, those feelings of guilt can make everything seem like a much bigger problem. You turn to masturbation as a coping mechanism, hoping for some relief, but instead it's followed by guilt that just amplifies your emotional struggle. The truth is, this guilt often comes from a place of self-judgment. When you're using masturbation as an emotional escape, there's a subtle message in your mind that tells you shouldn't need this. You should be able to deal with your emotions without turning to this. And as you feel the guilt creeping in, you start to think that the relief you were seeking was somehow wrong or invalid. This can leave you feeling even worse about yourself, creating a vicious cycle where the temporary relief you gained turns into a lingering sense of shame. For some people, guilt is compounded by the belief that masturbation is a sign of weakness, lack of self-control, or inability to deal with emotions in a healthier way. Society often places these kinds of negative labels on behaviors that are viewed as private or taboo, and this sense of judgment becomes internalized. So when you turn to masturbation in an emotional moment, you may not just feel relief or pleasure, but a rush of guilt that reinforces the belief that you are doing something wrong. This sense of guilt can then exacerbate feelings of isolation and loneliness, pushing you deeper into the emotional struggle you were trying to avoid in the first place. But the real problem lies in how this guilt makes you feel about your ability to handle emotions. It convinces you that you've failed in your emotional management, when in fact you're simply coping with pain in a way that many people do, albeit in a temporary and less than ideal way. The guilt becomes a harsh judgment against yourself, which only worsens the negative emotions you were trying to escape. You might start to believe that there's something inherently wrong with you, that you're incapable of managing your feelings in a healthier manner, and that this pattern of guilt and shame is something you deserve. This in turn leads to more emotional avoidance, as you become less inclined to confront what's actually bothering you. The guilt takes precedence, and suddenly, you're not just trying to escape your emotions, you're trying to escape the shame you feel for trying to feel better in the first place. It's a double bind. You're emotionally struggling, and the very act of trying to cope only serves to deepen the emotional weight. It's no wonder this cycle becomes so hard to break. Now let's address the internalization of societal judgment. Society places varying degrees of shame and guilt around masturbation, especially when it's used to cope with emotional pain. Many cultures, religions, and personal belief systems paint it as something that's inherently wrong, especially if it's done frequently or in times of emotional distress. This guilt often leads people to suppress their feelings and avoid talking about the issue altogether. The secrecy surrounding masturbation only increases the emotional burden, preventing people from seeking help or guidance on how to break free from this cycle. What people often don't realize is that guilt over masturbation is not a reflection of moral failure, but rather a reflection of how our emotions and behaviors have been conditioned by social expectations and beliefs. Masturbation is a natural part of human sexuality, and it's not inherently bad or unhealthy. But when it's used as a mechanism for avoidance, it's easy to see why guilt follows. It's not the act itself that is the problem, but how it's being used as a way to avoid emotional growth or healing. So how can we break this cycle of guilt and shame? The first step is understanding that guilt does not serve your emotional health. It only deepens the struggle you're already facing. If you're using masturbation as a way to escape, it's important to address the root causes of your emotional pain rather than simply beating yourself up for trying to feel better. It's essential to realize that self-compassion is key in breaking the cycle. You're not a failure for trying to manage your emotions. Every person has their coping mechanisms. The goal is to find healthier, more sustainable ways to handle those emotions, rather than just covering them up with temporary fixes. It's also important to seek out support when you feel stuck in this cycle of guilt. Talking to a therapist or counselor about your feelings of guilt, shame, or emotional avoidance can help you gain perspective and develop healthier coping strategies. Therapy is a safe space to explore these difficult feelings and work through them without judgment. Through therapy, you can learn how to face your emotions head-on and begin to heal in a way that doesn't involve avoiding or numbing them. And finally, remind yourself that emotional healing takes time. It's okay to make mistakes along the way, and it's okay to turn to coping mechanisms when you're struggling. The key is to not let these coping mechanisms define your emotional growth. As you work through your emotions in healthier ways, the guilt and shame that come with masturbation will start to fade, replaced by a greater sense of self-awareness and emotional control. Guilt is often the silent companion to masturbation when it's used as a coping mechanism, and it only deepens your emotional struggle. It amplifies feelings of isolation, shame, and self-judgment, preventing you from addressing the root causes of your pain. By recognizing this guilt as part of the cycle of emotional avoidance and seeking healthier ways to cope, you can begin to break free from the trap and find true emotional healing. Healing is possible, and it starts with being kinder to yourself and realizing that you're not alone in the struggle. The emotional trap that masturbation can create isn't just confined to isolated moments of guilt or temporary relief. It stretches far beyond that, affecting nearly every part of your life without you even realizing it. Over time, the cycle of using masturbation as a way to cope with emotional pain doesn't just leave you feeling worse after each episode, it starts to seep into the way you live your life on a daily basis. The most insidious part of this struggle is how it quietly undermines your emotional well-being, impacting your relationships, your ability to focus, and even your energy levels, all while you're left feeling like something just isn't quite right, but unable to pinpoint the cause. When you rely on masturbation to deal with stress or emotional pain, you're essentially teaching your brain to seek out temporary fixes instead of real, lasting solutions. This means that when you face challenges in your everyday life, whether it's a stressful day at work, a difficult conversation with a loved one, or just a general sense of dissatisfaction, you're more likely to turn to the same coping mechanism. The problem is, these temporary distractions don't allow you to fully process your emotions or deal with life's problems in a meaningful way. Instead of building emotional resilience or finding healthier ways to manage stress, you're reinforcing the idea that the only way to feel better is to avoid or numb the pain. This avoidance shows up in your relationships. When you're caught in this cycle, your emotional availability can become compromised. You may find yourself withdrawing from friends, family, or even a significant other, because you're too preoccupied with your internal struggle. You start to feel disconnected from the people around you, which only adds to the feelings of isolation and loneliness. Instead of reaching out for support when you're struggling, you turn inward, relying on masturbation as your emotional crutch. And over time, this isolation becomes more pronounced. You begin to feel more alone in your struggles, even when you're surrounded by people who care about you. On top of that, the emotional ups and downs that come from this cycle can affect your mood and energy levels in ways that are difficult to ignore. One moment, you might feel a temporary sense of relief or pleasure, but that's often followed by a crash, feeling empty, guilty, or more anxious than before. These shifts can make it harder to focus on your daily tasks. You might find yourself distracted at work, or unable to fully engage in conversations. The energy you once put into productive activities or hobbies is now channeled into maintaining this cycle of emotional avoidance, leaving you with little energy to invest in the things that matter most to you. Over time, this can leave you feeling mentally drained and unfulfilled, even if you're not consciously aware of why. The effects on your focus can also spill over into your personal goals. When you're using masturbation as a way to avoid difficult emotions, you're not able to fully engage with your aspirations or passions. You might have goals that you've set for yourself, whether it's career advancement, getting in shape, or learning a new skill, but the emotional weight of this ongoing struggle can prevent you from making progress. Your mind is preoccupied with seeking relief, and as a result, the energy and motivation you need to pursue your true desires are depleted. What you may not realize is that this cycle is holding you back from the things that could give you lasting fulfillment and meaning in life. Furthermore, the struggle with emotional avoidance can make it even harder to truly connect with yourself. Instead of being in tune with your emotions and working through them in a healthy way, you're teaching yourself to suppress or ignore them. This disconnection from your true feelings can lead to a lack of self-awareness. You might feel like you don't fully understand yourself, or that your emotional life is always on the edge of chaos. This lack of emotional clarity only intensifies your sense of confusion, frustration, and helplessness. The more you ignore or avoid your emotions, the harder it becomes to recognize what you really need or want in life. This silent struggle also impacts your ability to truly heal. The longer you rely on masturbation as a coping mechanism, the harder it becomes to break free. It's like putting a temporary fix on something that needs real long-term care. While you might feel better in the moment, the emotional issues that drive you to this coping mechanism don't go away. Instead, they continue to build up in the background, weighing on your mind and body. And eventually, those unresolved feelings find their way out in other ways, whether through increased stress, mood swings, or even physical ailments. The longer this silent struggle continues, the more entrenched the cycle becomes. But it's important to understand that breaking the cycle doesn't require perfection. It's about starting small, recognizing the emotional patterns that are driving you to seek relief, and taking active steps toward addressing those emotions in healthier ways. The key to breaking free from this emotional trap lies in becoming aware of how it affects every part of your life, not just in isolated moments, but in how you live and connect with the world around you. As difficult as it might seem, the good news is that this cycle can be broken. It begins by acknowledging the effects it's having on your life and your relationships, and then taking steps to address the root causes of the emotional pain. This could mean seeking professional help, working on healthier coping strategies, or learning to reconnect with your emotional self. Over time, as you break the cycle, you'll find that you not only feel better emotionally, but you'll also regain the energy, focus, and sense of connection that may have been missing for so long. In the end, the silent struggle caused by relying on masturbation as a coping mechanism doesn't have to be your reality forever. It's possible to heal, to reconnect, and to live a life that's free from the cycle of emotional avoidance. All it takes is the willingness to confront the emotions you've been hiding from, and to take those first steps toward a healthier, more fulfilling life. Breaking the cycle of using masturbation as an emotional crutch is not easy, and it's certainly not something that happens overnight. But it is absolutely possible to overcome it, and the journey starts with understanding that healing is a process, a gradual one. You've spent time, maybe even years, unknowingly reinforcing the cycle of emotional avoidance. But the good news is, once you recognize the pattern, you can start to take control and shift the direction of your emotional health. The first step in breaking the cycle is acknowledging the problem. This might seem like a simple step, but it's actually one of the hardest parts. For many, masturbation is a deeply ingrained habit, and acknowledging that it's being used as a way to avoid or numb painful emotions can feel like a wake-up call. But this is the moment when the healing process truly begins. You can't break free from something you don't fully understand, so recognizing how it impacts your mental and emotional state is essential. By accepting that you've been using masturbation as a coping mechanism, you can begin to open the door to healthier coping strategies. Once you've acknowledged the cycle, it's time to start addressing the emotions you've been avoiding. This can be difficult, especially if those emotions have been buried for a long time. Whether it's stress, anxiety, loneliness, or a deeper issue like depression, facing these emotions head-on is the key to breaking the cycle for good. Emotional avoidance is a coping mechanism in itself, but it doesn't lead to growth or healing. It keeps you stuck in a loop of temporary fixes that never address the root cause. By learning to confront your feelings instead of running away from them, you create space for real healing to occur. One way to start addressing emotions is through mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment, acknowledging your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and allowing them to pass without clinging to them. This doesn't mean ignoring your emotions. Rather, it means accepting them without labeling them as good or bad. when you allow yourself to feel your emotions, rather than pushing them down or using distractions like masturbation. You give yourself the opportunity to process and understand them. This can lead to profound emotional healing, as you learn to face the discomfort without seeking instant relief. Mindfulness techniques, such as deep breathing exercises or meditation, can be incredibly helpful in building emotional resilience. These practices help you stay grounded when overwhelming emotions arise, preventing you from automatically reaching for temporary fixes. Over time, these tools can help you better manage stress and anxiety, providing you with healthier alternatives to deal with tough emotions. Another powerful tool to break the cycle is therapy. Therapy provides a safe space where you can explore the underlying causes of your emotional struggles. A therapist can help you understand why you've turned to masturbation as a way to cope, and together, you can develop healthier ways to address your emotions. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is especially effective for breaking behavioral cycles like this one. CBT helps you identify the patterns in your thinking that lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms and provides you with practical tools to change those patterns. Therapy also gives you the opportunity to talk about the guilt, shame, and isolation you may feel, helping to release those feelings and replace them with healthier perspectives. It's also important to take care of your physical health when breaking the cycle. Emotional healing and physical health are deeply connected, and one can't truly flourish without the other. Exercise is one of the most powerful ways to boost your mood, reduce stress, and increase your overall sense of well-being. It doesn't matter what kind of exercise you do, whether it's walking, running, yoga, or strength training, moving your body helps release endorphins, the brain's natural mood lifters. Exercise also helps you get in touch with your body in a way that masturbation as an emotional crutch never will. By committing to a regular exercise routine, you're not only improving your physical health, but also building emotional resilience, which will help you break the cycle of emotional avoidance. Nutrition plays an equally important role. A well-balanced diet that's rich in nutrients supports not just physical health, but emotional balance as well. Foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids, such as salmon, walnuts, and flax seeds, can boost your mood and help reduce anxiety. B vitamins, found in leafy greens and whole grains, support brain health and help maintain emotional stability. When you nourish your body with whole, nutrient-dense foods, you're not only giving yourself the energy to break the cycle of emotional avoidance, but also providing your brain with the building blocks it needs to function at its best. In addition to exercise and nutrition, it's crucial to cultivate a strong support system. Many people who turn to masturbation as a coping mechanism do so because they feel isolated, disconnected, or alone with their emotions. By reaching out to friends, family, or support groups, you create a network of people who can provide emotional support and offer healthier perspectives on your struggles. Having someone to talk to, whether it's a close friend, a family member, or even a therapist, can be incredibly healing. These conversations help you realize that you're not alone, and they provide you with the emotional encouragement you need to keep moving forward in your healing journey. Building a support system doesn't mean simply talking to people when things get tough. It also means engaging in activities that bring you joy and connection. Spending time with loved ones, participating in social activities, or joining a hobby group can provide you with the emotional fulfillment that masturbation may have once offered. Social interaction releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone which helps create feelings of closeness, trust, and emotional well-being. In this way, meaningful connections can replace the temporary bonding you may have once experienced through masturbation. Finally, be kind to yourself. Breaking the cycle of emotional avoidance takes time, and it's important to be patient with yourself along the way. There may be setbacks, and that's okay. Healing isn't a linear process, and it's normal to experience bumps along the road. What matters is that you keep moving forward, even if it's one small step at a time. Every effort you make to confront your emotions and replace unhealthy coping mechanisms with healthier ones is a victory. Celebrate those victories, no matter how small they may seem, and use them as motivation to keep going. The key to breaking free from the emotional trap is to replace the temporary relief that masturbation provides with long-lasting, fulfilling ways of managing your emotions. Whether through mindfulness, therapy, exercise, better nutrition, or a stronger support system, these tools will help you build the emotional resilience you need to heal and thrive. By committing to this process, you'll gradually break free from the cycle, and eventually, you'll discover that you don't need to rely on short-term fixes anymore. You'll have the emotional tools to handle life's challenges without falling into old patterns. Now that we've taken a deep dive into understanding the emotional trap that masturbation can become, it's time to reflect on the key takeaways. The good news is, the cycle you've been trapped in doesn't have to define your future. In fact, by recognizing the signs, understanding the underlying emotional triggers, and committing to healthier habits, you have the power to break free from the cycle of emotional avoidance and start building a healthier relationship with yourself. The first thing to remember is that breaking free from this cycle isn't about feeling ashamed of your past behavior. It's about understanding that you were using a coping mechanism that wasn't serving you. You were trying to manage your emotions in the best way you knew how, and that's okay. It's important to approach yourself with compassion, not judgment. Every person has their own set of emotional struggles and coping mechanisms. What matters is that you've recognized where things went wrong, and you're now taking proactive steps to make lasting changes. The road to healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, and there will be bumps along the way. But the most important thing is that you've taken the first step by understanding the cycle and deciding to make a change. That decision is incredibly powerful. It shows that you're ready to confront your emotions and take control of your mental and emotional health. You don't have to keep relying on temporary fixes that only leave you feeling empty. Instead, you can build a new approach to handling your emotions that brings real, lasting relief. Let's talk about the importance of emotional self-awareness. One of the key steps in breaking the cycle is understanding your emotional triggers, the moments when you feel the urge to turn to masturbation as an escape. Is it stress, loneliness, anxiety? These are the emotions that often drive you to seek temporary relief. By becoming more aware of your emotions, you can begin to process them before they lead you down the path of avoidance. This awareness gives you the ability to interrupt the cycle and make healthier choices in the moment. This doesn't mean that difficult emotions will disappear overnight. It means that you'll be better equipped to handle them. Instead of resorting to old coping mechanisms, you'll have the emotional tools to manage those feelings in a way that promotes healing and growth. Whether through mindfulness, therapy, or other strategies like journaling, physical exercise, or meditation, each of these tools helps you stay connected to your emotions and process them in healthier ways. The goal is not to eliminate negative emotions, but to change the way you respond to them. The more you practice self-awareness and emotional regulation, the easier it becomes to avoid falling into the trap of emotional avoidance. Another key factor in reclaiming control over your emotions is developing new, healthier habits. Instead of turning to masturbation as a quick fix, you can replace it with activities that promote your well-being. For example, exercising regularly not only improves your physical health, but also boosts your mood by releasing endorphins, the brain's natural mood-enhancing chemicals. Exercise is also a great way to clear your mind, reduce stress, and build emotional resilience. By committing to a regular workout routine, you not only strengthen your body, but also your emotional well-being, which is essential for breaking the cycle of emotional avoidance. Equally important is nutrition. The food you eat plays a vital role in how you feel, both physically and emotionally. A diet rich in nutrients, such as vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats, can significantly improve your mood and energy levels. Foods like leafy greens, lean proteins, whole grains, and omega-3 rich foods like salmon and walnuts can support brain health and emotional balance. By fueling your body with the right nutrients, you give yourself the physical and mental energy to handle stress and emotional discomfort in healthier ways. A balanced diet isn't just about maintaining your weight, it's about taking care of your mental health and emotional well-being. It's also important to prioritize rest and sleep. When you're well rested, your body and mind are better equipped to handle the emotional ups and downs of life. Sleep is essential for emotional regulation, and it plays a significant role in helping you process difficult emotions. Lack of sleep can exacerbate feelings of anxiety, stress, and depression, making it even harder to break free from unhealthy coping mechanisms. Creating a consistent sleep routine, limiting screen time before bed, and ensuring that your sleep environment is conducive to rest are all crucial steps toward maintaining emotional balance and preventing emotional triggers from leading you back into old habits. Building a strong support system is another critical element in reclaiming emotional control. Healing doesn't happen in isolation, and connecting with others can be a powerful way to build resilience. Whether it's friends, family, or a therapist, having people to lean on during tough times makes the journey of healing feel less daunting. Supportive relationships provide you with the emotional nourishment and encouragement you need to keep moving forward. These relationships offer more than just comfort, they also challenge you to grow, keep you accountable, and help you process emotions in healthier ways. If you've felt disconnected or isolated, reaching out and building a network of supportive people can make a world of difference in your recovery process. Therapy is one of the most effective ways to break free from this emotional trap. Speaking with a therapist gives you a safe space to explore your emotions without fear of judgment. Therapy can help you identify the root causes of your emotional struggles and teach you how to process and heal from them. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, in particular, is helpful for breaking patterns of avoidance and unhealthy coping mechanisms. It helps you recognize the thoughts and behaviors that contribute to your emotional struggles and provides practical tools for changing them. With the help of a skilled therapist, you can learn how to replace old habits with healthier coping strategies, making it easier to manage your emotions in a sustainable way. Finally, be patient with yourself. Healing is not a linear process, and you will likely encounter challenges along the way. There will be moments when you slip back into old patterns, and that's okay. What matters is that you continue to move forward. Every step you take toward healing is a victory, and each day is an opportunity to build healthier habits. Celebrate the small wins, whether it's making it through a tough day without reverting to old coping mechanisms or practicing a new emotional regulation technique. Healing is about progress, not perfection. Be kind to yourself along the way, and know that every effort you make to break the cycle brings you closer to the emotional freedom you deserve. In conclusion, reclaiming emotional control and building healthier habits is the key to breaking the cycle of emotional avoidance and finding true healing. By practicing emotional self-awareness, developing healthier habits like exercise and nutrition, building a strong support system, and seeking professional help when needed, you can break free from the cycle of relying on masturbation as an emotional crutch. The road to healing takes time, but with patience, perseverance, and self-compassion, you can replace old, unhealthy coping mechanisms with new, empowering strategies that promote emotional well-being. The power to reclaim your life and break the cycle is within your reach. You just have to take that first step and keep moving forward, one day at a time.